learning never stops. You have to keep learning. You can't say, I mastered this or that. The minute you stop, you know there's something wrong.
Hi, welcome to English with Ray. Today on the podcast, we're joined with Jack from Plus British English. Now, Jack produces some excellent content, and as evidence of how great his content is, it's massively popular. And he only started making this content very recently. And when you hear Jack speak, you'll be surprised to find out that English isn't actually his first language. He is self-taught in English, which makes his level of proficiency just so impressive. He's gone on to achieve a degree in the English language. So if you want to learn about challenges of learning a language and how to overcome them, Jack is a great testament to that. And I think you will benefit a lot from the knowledge he shares in this video. We discuss the challenges he faced in his own journey and challenges which are common to other English learners. Now, Jack's content is primarily aimed at Arab speakers, but I think regardless of what your background is, there will definitely be knowledge to which you can benefit from. Anyway, without further rambling on, let's just get started in the episode, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this one.
My brother, thank you so much for joining me and coming on my podcast today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
So I was just shocked to find out, because I've been watching your videos. Your videos are like in kind of aimed at Arabic learners trying to learn English. You have a large base of followers who are benefiting from your videos. And I told you I have been improving my Arabic by watching your videos. They're aimed at Arabs trying to learn English, but I've been using it as an English speaker trying to learn Arabic. So how did you get started in the whole journey of video making and I guess coaching languages?
Right. So a bit of background. I graduated with a degree in English language and literature back in 2012 in Syria. However, I never got to kind of, practice because of the conflict at that time. So I was forced to leave. And, this something remained with me. Like, I've changed jobs and I've got out of the country. And this is a very long story, but how I get into kind of video kind of content creating was exactly in late 2020 last year. I was sort of got some time, some free time, extra time, on my hand, because I was not commuting to London. And I wanted to kind of do something. I've never done this before. As I said, over the past 6 or 7 years, I've never got into teaching because I was doing something completely different. Mm-hmm. And with this free time, in my hand, I decided, okay, why don't I just start a YouTube channel? So I started my YouTube channel, but I also realized, like, with YouTube, you can also do other stuff because you can repurpose the same content. So I said, okay, I'll go to do the same thing for my TikTok. I do the same thing for my Instagram. And it started with a very basic idea, like, maybe helping some friends and some people that I knew, because I've had some people reaching out and said, like, I'd like to learn, I'd like to improve my language. I said, okay, I'll start doing something. And this is where the whole idea started, literally less than a year. And today, sort of kind of grew, which is something, to be honest, I did not expect.
Yeah, well, that's incredible, because you don't have a small following. I think on Instagram you have more than 200,000 followers. YouTube, there's like 50,000 followers, and on TikTok, was it like 300 or 400,000 followers, something like that?
Yeah, something like that. So the most up-to-date figures from yesterday, I think it was over 50 on YouTube, 50,000 followers on YouTube, and I've got over 270,000 followers on Instagram, and around 440,000 on TikTok, which is incredible.
So I need to ask you, like, considering you were not taking this really seriously. You're just kind of dipping your toes in the pool, and you became famous. What was that like? Because like, how long has COVID been? A year, 2 years? It's not long. How was it to step in this, and then all of a sudden for your popularity to blow up the way it has?
I think for me, it kind of caught me by surprise.
Of
Because
course.
as I said, it takes some time, it takes some effort for you to go and plan and record and
Yeah.
edit and then post and comment and engage with your followers. But I have to say it's been quite interesting because you think yourself quite a lot of things about language until you really start planning and actually delivering, and that's the time you really realize how challenging it can be, how that like the responsibility that you've got, the responsibility to go do your homework, do your research,
Of course.
but also the importance of being authentic, of being genuine, and also, which is also the other part is, it is not easy to keep, kind of the same kind of level, constantly uploading, constantly trying to engage and responding to almost every single comment, which sometimes takes me my entire evenings, because
Wow.
I do my best to be respectful and try to respond to people, but sometimes that is not possible.
I can imagine it must be overwhelming. I got to ask, you're from Syria, right? So English is probably your second language?
English is my third language.
Third
So,
language? Wow.
yes, my
Amazing.
mother tongue is Kurdish,
Okay.
but having been born and raised in Syria, Arabic is also my I was considered my mother tongue, but also it's my second language. Although I would say it's my first language as well. And yeah, English is my second/third language.
Wow. So how did you go about learning English? When did that journey start?
This is a very, my passion, my love for language has been there for a very long time. I remember when I was a kid, I used to, we used to kind of, my dad used to listen to BBC radio in Arabic that used to, and it's still broadcasting, in the Middle East. And they'll always say, BBC from London, BBC from London. And from a very young age, I kind of used to listen to the BBC. And then when I sort of got into my intermediate school, I started like watching CNN, like news, and also BBC. And from that time, I think around the seventh or the eighth grade, I started kind of developed a passion for language. And this is where I started kind of reading, short stories in English, listening to podcasts, not was kind of listening to music basically in English, watching American films. And this is where, the more I watch, the more I listen, the more kind of I read, the more kind of, my passion grew for this language.
So what kind of age were you when you started the journey of learning English?
So I would say that I was around the age of 15 or 16.
Okay. And what were some of the hardest parts for you about learning English?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I think when you are learning a language, a significant challenge for me at the beginning was not having someone who speaks the language. So, I was living in a community where, for example, Arabic or Kurdish was the dominant language. So I tried, one of the things that I found really challenging at the beginning was I've learned quite a lot of vocabulary. So I used to have an Oxford like dictionary, like pocket dictionary, literally in my pocket. So wherever I go, like if I go from point A to point B, maybe a half an hour walk, I would take that dictionary with me all the way, and we'll be kind of learning words, like vocabulary. And at some point, I've had a good base of vocabulary. And the challenge was I was unable to kind of structure a meaningful sentence.
Mhm.
And after some time, I realized that, you can memorize maybe half, or a big kind of number of vocabulary. But if you do not know how to meaningfully put together a sentence, that's not going to make a lot of sense. That's not going to be helpful. So I think the main challenge for me at that time was, not sort of having the knowledge of kind of not being aware of the importance of building a sentence. But also the other challenge was sort of the grammar. The English grammar was quite challenging at the beginning. So quite complex, try to really get my head around it. At that time, there was no internet, there was no YouTube, there were no podcasts. You have to buy DVDs or CDs at that time, or you have to go, buy books, or you have to go listen to the radio. And it was a bit of a challenge until I managed to get hold of a couple of books that helped me with my grammar. And then I realized after that the challenge was pronunciation.
Sure.
So, pronunciation, you can speak the language if you can get, you can work on your grammar, but also a key part of that was you need also to have sort of, a good pronunciation. I'm not saying that it's like, it's a must have. I need to have like a perfect pronunciation, but still it was quite important. For example, just to give you an example, in the Arabic language, for example, the sound P does not exist. For example, I would come across some friends, for example, would say, let's go, like go to the party, party.
Yeah,
or
I see
like,
this with my students a lot. The letter ba.
exactly, and instead of party, or when people will say like, let's go to the park, and instead of go to the park,
Yeah.
it's like, what park? No, stuff like that. And also like, so it takes a bit of time for you to kind of master kind of the pronunciation, which at a later stage I realized that, it's really this is after I moved to the UK, that you realize there are dozens, maybe tens of different dialects and accents throughout, the United Kingdom, or
sure.
even like in the English speaking world, that you really do not have to worry about having a perfect accent or dialect. I mean, if you move to London, like I moved to London, and the kind of the number of dialects and the accent that you encounter on daily basis is something incredible.
Of course. It's funny because like I teach on Preply, and on my account it has the Union Jack. So people think, oh, this guy's from the UK, and a lot of these students, they see the Union Jack and they think, oh, that's the London flag. And then, they get talking to me and they realize, oh, wait, this guy's from Scotland. And they're saying, oh, is that different from London English, the London accent? And, you think there's 10 million people in London, how many different accents there are. It's somewhat fallacious to think, the American accent or the UK accent, what do I choose? How many accents are in the US? How many accents are not just like in the UK, but like, let's take Scotland. How many different accents are in Scotland? I'm in Glasgow. How many different? I can think of like 3 different kind of, I suppose, accents or styles of speaking just from my city. So this idea that students think, oh, I need to sound like, like RP English or something, or this is how they talk in the UK and this is how they talk in America. Unfortunately, it's just not that simple, because there's such a variety of different ways of speaking from region to region. Now, just on your last point, you said you were getting so much vocabulary. Now, this is a point a lot of my students make, is, for example, I try to elicit for, present perfect, for example. I try to elicit the present perfect from my student, and my student is not successfully using the present perfect. So I'll tell the student that, like, or I'll ask the student, how's your knowledge of the present perfect? And they say, I know it. I'll be kind of thinking, yeah, but you weren't using it correctly, or you weren't using it at all. And, when there's really some prime opportunities to use it, and, I might show them a worksheet or something, and they say, I know this stuff, but I just can't use it like freely in speech. But, but they know it, but they can't use it. So I guess my question coming back to you is, with all of that vocabulary you had learned, what we might call passive vocabulary, and learning the sentence structure, what was the process for you of turning that from just passive knowledge to, speech that you could actually freely use in conversation?
That's a great question. I think one of the first things I did when I realized that there's kind of the process was dysfunctional, that I decided to put perhaps each of these vocabulary, each one of these words, I would put it in 2 or 3 different sentences. So I get to know the context. The context is quite important. How do you use it, in different kind of, positions or in different places in a sentence? And I think that was quite crucial for me. And I think, this is something, like the minute you kind of focus on one word, and suddenly you start to hear it everywhere. Like when you're reading a newspaper, or you're listening to a news bulletin, or you're watching a movie, suddenly that word comes, across again and again and again, until kind of it becomes like kind of embedded, like, ingrained, and you mastered it. So for me, I think really what kind of worked for me was I ensured that every word or every vocabulary that I learned, that at least there are 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences that I put them in writing, and later on also do kind of go and check, the dictionary to ensure that that I'm using it correctly, and perhaps I'll write a short paragraph, include that, ensure that vocabulary is included, share it with friends just to get their feedback. And I think this was quite beneficial for me. It was really, really helpful during the process of learning.
So see, I want to come back to like Arabic and English again, right? The comparison. This is an interesting point of discussion. So I see this, I saw this difficulty for me learning Arabic, and I see the same difficulty for Arabs trying to learn English. And I'd like to know about your experience of this. I would say to my Arab friends, I met a really nice guy called Karar, and he was from Iraq, and he was like my primary Arabic teacher. And I would always say to Karar, how do I say, I have done this? And he would say to me, that's called present perfect, and it doesn't exist in Arabic. And I'd say, look, I don't care about grammar. Just tell me how to say, I have done this. Like, I didn't understand, how could this not exist in Arabic? Because this was before I was an English teacher. This was before I knew what present perfect was. I was like, what do you mean? I just want to know how to say, I have done this. And maybe I'd use Google Translate, and for like, I have done this, it'd use the verb ladai, which is like, I have.
Exactly.
And it just didn't work, so did you ever have that complication with these tenses? Because it wasn't until learning, I suppose, English grammar, so I could become an English teacher, that helped me understand so much about learning Arabic, such as the tenses. I was like, this is the structure of how language is like orchestrated in English. So in Arabic, it has its own way. And I think understanding the grammar of my own language really helped me learn Arabic more. So yeah, I guess for you, was there like, see all of these tenses, was it like difficult to understand? Before you answer, I just want to say something else, like another comment on that, is my native English friends, I will say to them, how many tenses exist in English? And they'll say to me, there's three tenses, right? 3 tenses, past, present, future. I say, no, there's 12. They look at me like, are you serious? There's 12 tenses? Because like in time, you can only go like forwards or backwards. It's not like you can go sideways in time. So the idea of, even for native English speakers, that there's 12 tenses is so like ridiculous. But yeah, for you is, I don't know what Kurdish is like. I'm guessing Kurdish is similar to Arabic, but going, let's say, from Arabic, a language which has 3 tenses, how did you go from that to like learning English, which has 12?
I have to say it was particularly challenging for me with the present perfect tense.
Sure.
And like quite similar, like in Arabic, you have like three main sort of tenses. You've got the present, the past, and the future. And it's been really, I mean, during the early days of the journey, it's been kind of mind-blowing to go and then like the present. You talk about the kind of the different parts of the present tense.
Yep.
You go to the past and the different parts, and also the future and the different parts of the future tense. And it takes you a bit of time until you realize the importance. Like, I mean, if you really do not get a good grasp on these different aspects of each tense, you really will struggle. I mean, and that's why you sort of, it takes a bit of time and effort for you to kind of get your head around it. But I have to say, no matter how you master it, there will always be something, you will get it wrong, because you'd be still thinking in your native mother tongue, no matter what, which sometimes does not translate into English or vice versa. So I assume this could be something quite similar for an native English speaker trying to learn Arabic and vice versa.
Oh yeah, it really is. I think understanding grammar, like, see, when I first started trying to learn Arabic, I thought I could just skip the grammar. But later I came to realize how important it was. And when I first actually started teaching, I didn't even understand, as an English teacher, I didn't understand English grammar. I had no idea what the system was. So I teach on Preply. And when I first started I knew that I wanted to be an English teacher, and I had a lot of teaching knowledge, but I didn't have a lot of language teaching knowledge. And the way I kind of learned was I would do classes and I'd tell students, no, you said that wrong. And they might say, why is it wrong? And I wouldn't really know why it was wrong. I just knew that it was wrong. Or I'd say that was wrong. And they'd say, oh, that's supposed to be present perfect, right? And I'd be like, right. And then I had a wee notebook, present perfect. What the hell is present perfect? And then I had to go and research it. And it was kind of through that process I learned the language. Now something which is interesting about yourself is you mentioned you had your dictionary, you'd be traveling, you'd be picking up words. Now, some people ask me this question, and I bet you get this question a lot about, like, what's the best way to learn a language? And for me, I would say there's not quite a straightforward answer to that, because, for example, depending on what you're interested in, depending on what conversations you're going to be having, whether you want to go straight to books or straight to having conversations, there's a lot of, I suppose there's a lot of different things to take in account. But I think one of the most important things is just having a goal. Like, I want to be able to read this book, or I want to be able to have these kind of conversations, or I want to be able to do a job interview. You have the goal, and then you think of the language you need, and you take kind of incremental steps. So it's not like there's just one such rigid way of going through a language. But I guess where I'm going with this, and the question I want to ask, is when people ask you about what's the best way to learn, or if maybe one of your friends or your followers were to reach out to you and ask you if you had a way of that you thought was particularly a good methodology of learning a language, what kind of advice might you offer to someone who asks that question?
That's a great question. I get quite a lot of questions quite similar to this, and people say, like, what is, like, the magical way of learning English? And I always have to, unfortunately, kind of disappoint them. I say, like, no, there's no, like, kind of a magical way for you to learn English. It takes time, it takes effort, it needs planning, it needs commitment. And I always go back to the same point that if you need to learn English, you need to work on the 4 skills at the same time. So you need really to dedicate time to each of these 4 skills, like the reading, speaking, writing and listening skills. And it takes time, but the most important thing is that you need to you need to have plan, you need to be committed. And the most important thing for me, regardless if it's English or a different language or anything in life, you need to have passion for it. If you do not have passion, you need to you are going to struggle. So my number one advice to anyone is, I always tell them that you need to fall in love with what you're doing. And the minute you start kind of treating language as a lover, I'm sure you will succeed, because you always try to be perfect. You always do your best to your lover, and treat language something quite similar like that. And I have to say, I advise them to work on these four skills, but I encourage them to, for example, like one of the kind of major challenge that at least some of the people that I know, some of my students, was quite a lot of focus on vocabulary and, kind of indulging themselves with vocabulary without kind of getting to know how to use it in context. So I told them, like, it's really important to get to know the word and how to use it. The usage is really important. Other people focus on grammar, and the more they focus, the more they lose sight of other aspects of the language. The other thing also is some people get sort of lost between formal versus informal slash slang. So people say, like, about I've the way I listen, the way I watched it, it is different and it's quite challenging for me. So I tell them, you really have to focus on everything. It's not like one aspect. You need to also be quite competent when it comes to formal, but as well as informal. The other also, which is also a significant part of the language learning journey, is there are certain communities where people feel quite shy. People are quite fearful of making a mistake. So making a mistake brings quite a lot of sense of shame to that individual. I always encourage them, you do not have to, feel shy. You do not have to fear of making mistakes. Mistakes are there for a reason. Mistakes are there for you to learn from them. And I told them, look, in my early days when I was learning English, I would have to go, I used to have like a small, kind of recording machine, I used to use a cassette. I used to record myself and hear back, just to help me improve my speaking, as well as kind of evaluate and assess my speaking. I also used to stand in front of a mirror and kind of look at myself performing, like imagining myself like, somewhere in Hollywood or somewhere in London giving a speech to people. And this helps me quite a lot. There will be sometimes when my mom would call me from the next room and she's like, hey, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Is everything all right? I say, no, that's me. Don't worry about me, So that's okay. You make mistakes. This is part of the process, and you don't have to worry too much about that. So these are some sort of the key messages that I give to fellow learners.
Fantastic answer. Now, just going back, right? You mentioned passion. Passion's really important, and you can see how students with a passion or with a goal, they excel faster. People think, someone said to me once, what's the point of setting a goal? Because, if you're studying regularly anyway, you get there at the same pace. Honestly, people underestimate the power of goal setting. Now, this isn't like, goal setting applies in any industry, anything you want to do, whether get stronger, lose weight, gain a degree. Everything goes smoother when you set goals, specifically SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and most importantly, timely. You put time on it. Like, not just I want to achieve this, but I want to achieve this by June, and for me to achieve it by June, we split it up. So this month I need to do this, and this month I need to do this. One piece of advice I just really strongly forward to any of the listeners is creating SMART goals, which are time bound, and breaking up as to, if I want to achieve this, this is what I need to get by the end of the month. And I find It's like, it just kind of lubricates and makes the whole process smoother, faster, and better. But anyway, I'm kind of digressing. To come back to the question I want to ask you is, you spoke about the importance of passion. Now, passion is an emotion, motivation, love, anger, happiness. And emotions have their periods where they're strong, and then they have their periods where they kind of fizzle out and die for a period. So how do you keep the passion emotion going, or how do you stimulate that passion when occasionally from time to time it may fizzle out?
For me, the way it worked was to sort of surround myself with things that I'm quite passionate about. So, for example, when it comes to my reading, vast majority of the books were in English, like English novels, and stories and short stories or magazines. When it comes to my music, some of my best musicians, kind of, singers, all in English. When it comes to my movies, again, we're all kind of in English language. And even when it came to my social media at that time, most of my social media, Facebook at that time and Twitter, all in English. So that helped me massively. This helped me, kind of improve. This helped me kind of be kind of, kind of on top of things when it comes to learning. But the other thing also, you need encouragement, because I remember I was a student during the secondary school, and I used to get quite a lot of praise from my teacher, because during the exams, all students will have kind of an examination kind of paper form. I was the only person who would have a different examination form, because their expectations of me was much higher, because I put quite a lot of effort. So that put me in a position that, they've got an expectation. I need to work harder on myself to achieve that. And I think that gave me a great push when it comes to learning.
Amazing answer. I just have a couple of wrap-up questions for you, a couple of shorter, easier questions. I say easier. My other podcast guests always struggle with these questions. Now, first one, what is your favorite book that you have read?
That is a great question. There are quite a lot of ones. Oh my, it's really hard to narrow it down to one. But I have to say, I'm very much into political novels, and my favorite is 1984.
Yeah,
Exactly.
George Orwell. It's funny, I was talking about that book with a student today.
It is my favorite book.
Did you read it in English?
I've read it several times in English. I've read it once in Arabic, but the experience in English, it was fantastic. It's really it get lost basically in translation. So yes, I read it several times in English.
I have to say, I tried reading 1984. I tried reading it. I'm not, despite all the books behind me, I'm not really a great reader. And I love learning, and I think 1984 is a gem with amazing information in it. But I found 1984 to be a really difficult read.
I mean, to be honest, it's a piece of cake compared to some of the books that are like Dubliners, by James Joyce, or a portrait of an artist as a young man, or some of the early when I was in Syria, the early days, like I was using I used to read Country Tales by Chaucer. And if you compare 1984 to these ones, this is just nothing. This is an absolute a breeze, like a walk in the park compared to these ones.
You've had a bunch of excellent idioms today, and I hope the learners who are watching this, they have their notepads and they're writing down your idioms. I've heard you say, I think I heard you say, wrap your head around it, walk in the park, a breeze. You've got some excellent idioms there. So another one for you, right? Oh, in fact, before I move on, Another shout from George Orwell is Animal Farm. Have you ever read that?
This is one of the early books that I read in English literature. In fact, it was a requirement in the early, like as a freshman, it was a requirement. So I read that Animals Farm. It was an eye opener for me.
Yeah, sure. Okay, next question. What's a piece of advice you've been given that you never forgot?
The one great piece of advice that I've got that I will never forget is that learning never stops. You have to keep learning. You can't say I mastered this or that. The minute you stop, you know there's something wrong.
Great piece of advice. That's amazing. The last question, which is an easier one, is where can people find you?
Right. Yeah, there are several ways that people can find me. So if you Google British English Plus, hopefully you will come across my YouTube channel or my TikTok or my Instagram. And this is where you'll be able to find my contact details and get in touch. If there's anything I could help with, please feel free to drop me a line.
Great. I'm going to include all of your links so people can subscribe to your pages. I think everyone can benefit from watching your content. Your content is absolutely awesome. I'm using your content to polish my Arabic, but I think, for the English language learners out there, they can definitely take advantage of following you on social media and benefiting from your awesome content.
It makes me, I'm delighted. I'm so pleased to hear so. And this even makes me so determined now to sort of, because, if you look at my videos, mostly they are written Arabic, not spoken Arabic. So I try kind of to speak in English and also have the subtitles in Arabic. But perhaps I need to reconsider and try to pronounce kind of, do Arabic, English, both pronunciation at the same time. So this perhaps would help other learners as well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's something to consider for the future is you could do Arabic learning content. Maybe people would be interested. I mean, see your audience, like from watching your videos, you absolutely deserve all of the fame that you have got, the abundance of fame that you've gotten over the last year or 2 years, because your content is awesome. And I can see from the comments, I can see it's clearly helping people. So maybe I wouldn't suggest changing too much, because whatever you're doing is working. If people like it. But, I encourage you to keep it up, and I wish you nothing but success for the future. And hopefully, if you like, we can do another one of these again sometime.
Absolutely. It'd be my absolute pleasure.
Great. So I just encourage everyone to follow the links, but thanks again for coming on today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.